Hello, everyone. This is Rosemary Coates in Silicon Valley. I'm your host for this edition of the Frictionless Supply Chain podcast. I'm the executive director of the Reshoring Institute, where we help companies bring back or expand their manufacturing in the U.S. And I am a contributing writer to Supply Chain Management Review. Today, I'm very excited for my guest, Kathleen Chan. She's the founder and CEO of Calico, a global sourcing and manufacturing platform, helping businesses find production locations worldwide. In these days of very chaotic tariff policy and unpredictable changes in geopolitics, Kathleen's company can help guide manufacturers through the maze of world trade. So, welcome, Kathleen.
Hey, hello. Thank you for having me.
So tell us about your background and your education and the companies you work for, and a little bit of just general background about your history in global manufacturing.
Yeah, for sure. I started my career off at Microsoft. So big tech really got that exposure on kind of the forefront of what technology looks like, and then very quickly moved into starting my own brands. It was the heyday of D2C, built a couple brands from the ground up. And what that really meant in that time was built their supply chains from the ground up. So I, would spend months knocking on factory doors, walking factory floors, like learning the ins and outs of sourcing, manufacturing, really honestly just experiencing it. This wasn't something I studied in school. I had a different degree, but really I learned the ropes by doing it and putting my money on the line. So we built a couple brands, grew that, exited those. And, as I was gearing up for the next adventure, I really realized that a lot of my interests and my passions kind of laid in the groundwork of building those supply chains. I noticed a lot of inefficiencies, but moreover, I realized that these were the backbone of all the product companies I had built, and there were ways to make that more efficient. And so that was the small little catalyst that started Calico way back then. But yeah, that's our experience. That's my experience.
Okay. So tell us a little bit more about Calico. And I know that you're dealing with AI, and that's, of course, very hot topic these days. So we're interested in how that fits into this global sourcing model.
Yeah, for sure. So Calico is a sourcing co-pilot powered by AI. The best way to think about this is a multi-agentic system that helps brands, specifically in the apparel, footwear, and accessory sectors, create, source, and manufacture. So we have manufacturers across the world, about 150 of them. We're plugged into them. And so what that means is with our AI, with a single prompt, you can generate manufacturable designs. From there, every design can be routed immediately to a manufacturer that's been fully vetted and extensively explored on our manufacturing platform. And from there, we can get things like quoting, capacity, using the real-time data to make sure that this thing that you've just created can actually be manufactured. And then from there, we very quickly put them into the lines, and our multi-agent systems will do everything from place the order, create commercial like invoice docs, track milestones, do all the kind of that what I call the messy middle of manufacturing, the manual tasks there. And so, we take that all the way until it's ready on the factory floor for a freight forwarder to pick up. So that's our business.
Wow. So, for example, if I had some idea about making an apparel line, for example, I could come to you and help find designers and then manufacturers also.
Well, our AI actually does the designing for you.
Oh,
So yes, with a single prompt, you can do that. So you can generate manufacturable designs, tech packs, patterns. But what's really interesting is we don't just generate new products. We actually, because of the multi-pronged approach we take with our sourcing and manufacturing, we also help brands counter source or diversify their manufacturing for existing lines. Which has been a really core, I think, hot topic as of late. So we don't just look for that newness, we do help with the secondary piece as well.
so if a company was doing all of their manufacturing in China, for example, they could come to you and look and find alternate sources and alternate designs that could be produced in different places. Wow.
100%. And I think that's really interesting about what we do. And it's a little bit different about what we do. We built our entire network outside of China. So we have manufacturers that are in Turkey, Southeast Asia, Latin America. And so that is something very unique about what we bring to the table. I think kind of timely and accidentally timely in this case, but it is part of what we offer.
Yeah, nobody expected it, right? But but yeah, I mean, there's so many companies that are looking for alternative places to manufacture in this kind of unstable environment. It's really hard to know where to go.
Oh,
So
absolutely. It's pretty chaos.
yeah, so AI is going to help iterate designs and okay, and designing itself. So you go with an idea and can
Mhm.
put it into the Calico system, and it will generate, I guess, pictures or images, right, of what you're
Everything,
gonna.
exactly. So it'll do everything from marketing ready images, putting it on your fit model, all the way to tech packs and actually how to create the item for kind of that pattern file for your manufacturer as well. So it really does help make that design process easy and seamless, and it's meant to act as almost a co-pilot to your technical designer design team today. And so part of what's really interesting of what we do as well is we don't just chase the newness. We can help support that with brands that are looking for new products, new assortments every season or collection. We help support that because that's been kind of a growing piece of a lot of how brands tackle their growth today.
Wow, it's just fantastic. It just sounds like a wonderful tool to use in that initial process, product realization, I guess we would call it. So is it basically apparel, footwear, and what, jewelry? Or you said accessories?
Accessories. Yep. So we have a really large chunk of what we do in apparel when we do the supporting accessories. So hats, small leather goods, socks, jewelry. We can you name it. We can kind of handle that piece, and a little bit of footwear as well.
Okay. Wow. That's fantastic. I'm just really impressed with all the things that you're offering and how it can really help, especially small manufacturers that don't have those kind of resources at their fingertips to be able to come to you and to get the help that they need worldwide.
Oh,
Uh,
100%. I think that's what makes a lot of our network, depending on the region, is that mom and pop manufacturer, is that family owned business or the generational business? Is there not these massive, massive conglomerates? And in a lot of cases, our manufacturers are leaning towards, looking to us to help them drum up that business development, but also support in some of the factory operations, that front end piece that, I think every factory owner hates to do, but has to do to keep the business going. So that's the factory benefit on our end too.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So I understand that you're backed by Serena Ventures. Is
Yeah,
that right?
they're one of our lead investors.
Oh, okay, okay. So this is Serena Williams' company, and did she focus on women? I think women entrepreneurs. Is that right?
I think a lot of what the fund focuses on is things and businesses that help everyday life, like women's lives, be better, or just everyone's daily lives be better. So I think that's kind of the focus of the firm. Naturally, there's some gravitation towards female founders or diverse founders, even. But like that's kind of the core focus of the fund, I would say, and they can definitely speak to it better than I can for sure.
Oh, okay. That's fantastic. Wow. So you're backed by other funds as well?
We are backed by other funds. We did the pre-seed seed rounds out in Silicon Valley, and so we do have several other investors that are around the cap table as well.
Oh, very good. So let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of your customers or your clients coming to you. With the imposition of the Trump tariffs, are you seeing a lot of companies departing China and looking for alternate locations? And if so, where?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we are seeing that exodus, given what's happened today with the tariffs, and depending on when you're watching this, it's currently at 145%. So
Yeah.
that stands to change perhaps in the next 30 to 60 days. But today, that's untenable for many brands. And so they are looking to move out of China. We're seeing a portion of them do that. There's a portion that are, kind of doing the wait and see approach, but reality is it's likely that they're looking to diversify aggressively and very quickly. In terms of countries that they're looking at today, that's really the $1 million question, I think. Because as we can see, there are some very rapid overnight changes that can happen that can make this decision challenging for folks. But what we're seeing on our end is a new renewed interest in certain regions like Turkey or Latin America. But more importantly, we are seeing a lot of folks tap into our Southeast Asian regions as well. And that really is, given kind of the category we service, it's where a lot of that specialty lies, right? So it's very challenging to just stand up a net new supply chain in a country that has no history of that or no access to that material or material base. And so we are seeing a lot of Southeast Asia interest as well. And it does, I think it will fluctuate depending on what happens in the next 60 days.
Yeah, especially if it involves sewing activities
Yep.
with a high labor content, then Asia is probably the right place. But also Mexico. I mean, I know what we found through our research is that central Mexico has some of the cheapest labor in the world, even cheaper than China. And so, that's often a region that we explore, or help our clients explore. But by and large, I think Southeast Asia is probably the place where you're going to see most of that movement go. And then Turkey is interesting too. I have known that Turkey has been a textile producer for a long time, but I think they were doing a lot of linens and towels and, kind of home supplies, not so much apparel. But you're seeing a rise in Turkey as well. Is that what you're
I
saying?
am. Yeah, absolutely. So Turkey's been fantastic for exactly as you described, the natural based fibers, and synthetics are less common, but they really, really do excel at specific materials that are more premium or they are of a natural base. I know the homeware has been kind of an important growing sector there, but we are seeing a lot of interest in kind of more premium quality hand in a lot of their apparel businesses there. And to your comment of Mexico, 100%, like we are seeing some interest in there. The one challenge is always, especially with this type of industry, is where do you get your materials?
Right,
How
right.
get your materials there in a costly and timely manner? And so that dictates a lot of where you settle in terms of your manufacturing.
Yeah, that's right. So you in order to qualify for USMCA, a duty-free entry into the US, it's got to be totally produced or including all the raw materials in Mexico. And I think most of the textile production is still overseas. Although we're also seeing growth in textile production in America, in the Carolinas and in Georgia. Because it's fully automated, doesn't require that much labor. So the economics of the decision are different. But Mexico, I think, seems to be a really good option for a lot of companies. And but as we were just talking about, if you have to import your textiles from China,
Yeah,
you're not going to win in that situation. As there is still tariffs that would apply on the import side in Mexico, and then it won't qualify for country of origin Mexico if you import into the US. So it's complicated trade issues.
yeah.
And I think, you can't make broad assumptions until you really get down and investigate how that supply chain would work.
100%. Yeah, that's exactly the biggest. I think that's also what's creating so much anguish and turmoil right now. It's not as simple as moving your manufacturer to a different place. It's really just it's secondary and tertiary supply chains that also need to move. And so that's been a big complex problem that we're looking at right now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of oversimplification in when politics enters, when politicians start talking about global supply chains, they oversimplify things and don't have an appreciation for how complex the trade issues are. And I think that's dangerous. It makes people assume it's you can just snap your fingers and move a factory around and source wherever you want and put thousands of people to work sitting on plastic stools at sewing machines, and it isn't like that, as you know, in world trade. It's much more complicated, and the workers are different in every region. The productivity is different, and so forth. So there's a lot to consider for sure in that decision. Do you think any manufacturing is going to come back to the U.S.
A
or
good
to
question.
Canada? You're in Canada,
Yeah,
right?
we're in Canada, so for sure, I think that's a really good question. I think there will always be a baseline of manufacturing and that exists in each of these countries. I don't think it'll be fully wiped out, for example. However, specifically in our categories, and we talked about that material piece, that's what makes it hard to bring back. And exactly to your point, like, we can have the assembly factories, but we're still importing in materials. And, that's the crux of it, right? And so I think right now for specific industries, that's still possible. But I think truly for our space, the apparel and textile based, like heavy industries, your material bases are still overseas. Like the best in class mills are still in parts of Southeast Asia. There are part in Turkey and LATAM. And so like that's really where you have to go, because you're back to that same problem, whether it's the US or Canada, importing is still importing. And so it's a challenge, but I don't believe that it's going to really, ignite the domestic manufacturing industry as, people seem to think it will. Because that, again, your tier 1 is you can move it back, but your tier 2, your tier 3, where do they live? Overseas.
Yes, I completely agree. And we're the Reshoring Institute, so we're in favor of bringing manufacturing back to the US if possible, but we're also realists and understand that most of that manufacturing is never coming back to the US, and that we probably don't want, well, we don't want the 23 cent an hour t-shirt production back. Because it doesn't pay a living wage, and because those kind of workers just don't exist in America, or probably in Canada either. I mean, I've been in factories all over China, for example, where there are thousands of people in these cramped conditions manufacturing shoes and clothes and electronics and so forth. And that I just cannot imagine anything like that in the US. So once again, I think the politicians tell these big stories about, how all this manufacturing is coming back, and they have no idea what reality is, what it really would look like. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, you're right. And beyond that too, like cost of living is something definitely to consider in this, like you mentioned. And so I do believe that it is far greater than just moving your first factory. There's a lot of economic and societal complications that we have to think about if we are considering that specific domestic industry coming back.
Yeah, I mean, given that there are some manufacturers in the US, apparel manufacturers that are well known, Ferrara, for example, in New York. There are some, Vicky V is another one that do their manufacturing in the US. But those are, relatively smaller brands. They're not the mass production that you would find for clothing and so forth that's sold at Walmart or Target or somewhere like that. And the cost structure just isn't going to support it. So, I definitely agree with you there. We'd like to see manufacturing come back, but what I think is most appropriate to come back is automated production, robotics, machine tools. So really advanced manufacturing belongs in the US, which requires a different skill level and pays a different rate and so forth. So we may see some of that about come back. So we talked a little bit about this, but tell me some more about the most important developing regions of the world, not just countries, but are you seeing most of the development? And because like I know Central America is a big place for apparel development and so forth. So what regions are you are you seeing?
So we like regional as a whole, I think really when we ask that question, we're looking at like what's the hand, the expertise, and what material is available for that region. And so we are seeing a lot in Southeast Asia, of course. They were the big winner the first time around, and they continue to excel and grow. And so that's really where you would still go for that breadth of apparel that you're looking for, right? Whether it's parts of denim, like cut sew jersey, like they do all that very, very, very well. And so we do have a big base over there that is seeing that overflow coming from China.
That's in Southeast Asia.
That's in Southeast Asia, and there's parts of that, whether it's Vietnam, Indonesia, or even like India in some cases, you're really looking at that overflow from China, and they are strategically placed in certain trade routes or sea freight routes to still make it efficient for you to produce there. So that I think that's still becoming the clear winner. But what you're also seeing is that growth in that Central America region, right? And so historically, you mentioned it earlier, there is a burgeoning, economy there for this, but they are solely focused on kind of performance wear or sportswear.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that's really kind of where we would go for that. Obviously, if you're looking at Peru, you're looking at, they have fantastic Pima cottons, they have fantastic alpaca wool. So you're really going there for that material base. Usually what we recommend and what we're looking at is go to where your material base is most easily accessible, right? If we're looking at creating a gorgeous alpaca wool sweater, we're going to Peru. Like we're
Yeah.
not going to try to make this happen in certain regions because right now it's really what makes the most sense. And so similarly, that's what we see in kind of that Turkish region as well. We are seeing also Egypt and Morocco pop up as areas of interest, but they do have more narrow of a breadth of category that they can service. And so each of these regions are developing and they're growing, but they're growing at their own pace simply because quite literally up until a month ago, it's been centralized in China.
Yeah. Right. 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 Okay. So Southeast Asia, Central America, some in the Middle East, right? I guess Turkey and Egypt, Bangladesh. That's another high apparel manufacturing area. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's not just tariffs though that complicate this decision. There's also, other kind of political questions or how the
Right.
economy is doing in that region, inflation. So really, this decision is kind of a multivariable approach, and so there are regions that are accepting that overflow, but that also means these regions are the capacity is filling up quick.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
like there
I
are
know, I know Vietnam had that problem. It looked like a great spot to move your manufacturing, but there's no factories available. They're full.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're super full. I think what they're looking for this time, and we think about this pretty deeply, is it's not just for the short term, like which customers are genuinely looking at moving this out of wherever they're currently at into a new region for the long term, right? Because what happens if the tariffs go back down to 10% and
Yeah. So that's a good point. Do you think that companies are really looking at the long term, or, it seems to me companies are becoming more agile in terms of, maybe they'll manufacture for a couple years in one region and then start splitting off and going to another region, or they have multiple regions where they can shift back and forth. I've seen that too recently.
so we've definitely seen and we encourage the latter approach for sure. I think a lot of what the first round of tariffs, I'm talking like 2018, 2019, that really kind of put, the true we need to diversify on the map, right? And whether that means a China plus one, or in this case today, it's not really China, it's just everything else. Companies are looking to be like the smart companies, the smart brands are becoming more agile. They are diversifying where they're producing, and that's the smart play, right? I think it'd be very scary today to be in only one region,
Yeah.
waiting for the next shoe to drop. And so today we encourage brands to have multiple factories. We encourage that capacity to be shared because that is the way that you're going to survive, not just the next 90, but beyond.
So on your platform, do you explore not only potential factories or regions, but also the economics of it? I mean, what other factors go into that decision to produce a recommendation?
100%. So it's not just, hey, here's a name and we'll see you later.
Yeah.
Calico actually does act in many cases like your sourcing co-pilot, right? So we do produce the actual quote, the cost breakdowns, what it means to land that, whether it's landing it in Long Beach versus Atlanta. We go that far to break that down for you because we're smart enough to be able to sense of what the cost is and what the freight is and what the tech, like we've done this enough to be able to tap into that data for our brands. And so it really is the consideration today between, if you're debating between Turkey and, India for something, what does that look like to not only buy, but more importantly, land in the US? And
Okay.
so that's part of the service that we do provide. In many cases, that's like kind of the biggest, most exciting thing today, because I think, again, in the last 30 days, it's been an interesting ride with tariffs.
Okay. All right. So a potential customer would come to you and then they can access the platform through a subscription, or they're not actually buying the software, it's an online subscription process, right?
Right. So we work as a web platform. We can also sit in your Slack, your Teams, your email, however you like. But let's say you're going across from a web platform perspective, so you can access us online. You would input, hey, what am I looking to create? And Calico would actually act as your sourcing co-pilot to execute the rest of it. In terms of how we charge and how we make our money, we work very similarly as other traditional sourcing, legacy sourcing agencies would. So we work with brands for the long term. So it's less of a sporadic, here, I have a question and I go away. Because we not only give you the quotes, but we place you in the factories. We have teams on the ground that actually help execute that order until it's completed. People or brands rather are choosing us to be their sourcing partner from end to end. And so that's how you work with us.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Kathleen. I really appreciate it. You've had this successful career and all this development, really interesting product. What advice can you give to women in particular, but also men, that might be listening as they develop their careers in global supply chain management?
I think the best thing to do is truly just to go and start and try. And make the mistakes, right? I think that's kind of important, obviously within the confines of reasonableness. But I think for many folks, it can be kind of daunting and scary, really, to look at global sourcing today, given all of the complexities and all of the ongoing, almost hourly changes to our trade policy. And so I think really that can paralyze some folks. And so I'll give a timely advice of just go do it. Like just take the leap and try.
Do it.
Just do it.
All
Like
right.
there's nothing else.
That's terrific. Can you please give us your contact information if listeners want to get a hold of you or have a look at Calico?
Yeah, for sure. So you can find Calico at joincalico.com. We're there. Visit us anytime. You can find me on LinkedIn under Kathleen Chan. And if you need to reach us via email for anything, it's hello@calicoai.com.
Oh, terrific. Okay, great. And you can listen to more frictionless supply chain podcasts on Supply Chain Management Review's landing page, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can reach me, Rosemary Coates, at rcoates@reshoringinstitute.org and visit our website, www.reshoringinstitute.org, where we publish all of our research on manufacturing in America. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day.